with former DIA intelligence officer Matthew Shoemaker and Fox News medical contributor Dr. Mark Siegel. Gentlemen, thanks very much for joining us this evening. I want to get started on what we can expect next in Ukraine from here. Let's first go to the top Republican on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Congressman Michael McCaul, and what he had to say this evening on Special Report.
We should be very clear-eyed to Mr. Putin that nothing is off the table, that nothing will be too provocative for the United States of America anymore. And I think too often this president he said too many times what he's not going to do and not what he's, what he wants to do or what we should do as a nation. If he crosses that line, I believe that's a red line.
So, Matthew, to you first. With all of this discussion about whether Vladimir Putin is going to use chemical weapons in Ukraine, first, do you think he's going to? And secondly, what should the Biden administration do as a response, or even before that becomes, or if that becomes a reality?
Thanks for having me on. I think that when it comes down to it, the use of chemical weapons is within Russian doctrine, within Russian military doctrine. It has a lower threshold, if you will, and it is not as taboo as using nuclear weapons. So when it comes to the nuclear weapon, or excuse me, the chemical weapon side of things, they are much more a possibility with regards to what Mr. Putin might possibly use. And the question really is, does he feel that the cost is worth it? And right now, I don't think he thinks that we would push back too terribly much. President Biden a few days ago said that we would respond in kind. It's unclear what that would mean, and he made similar statements back in January, saying the same thing if Russia invaded Ukraine, and as we know, Russia invaded Ukraine. So if Mr. Biden thinks that he can keep doing the same things with very general remarks, it doesn't seem to be working, and I'm unclear about whether or not it's going to continue to work.
Since that invasion, we have seen incredible destruction across that country. That has so many consequences on the people who are living there. Dr. Siegel, you have been following what Doctors Without Borders are doing there. I mean, you talk about a war that has plenty of heroes, and not to overuse that term, which it is in our society, but what those heroes are doing there. Let's first go to a doctor about what they're looking at, what they're facing in combating this and trying to treat people there.
Well, you know, Rich,
so we are trying to supply materials that could be helpful in preventing wound infections, such as wound vacs. And the hospital right now has the equipment it needs, but clearly, those could rapidly become overwhelmed. So I would say that sterility, maintaining a sterile environment, preventing infections, treating infections when they do arise is absolutely a primary concern of ours.
Dr. Siegel, how vital is that to this battlefield that we're seeing across the country?
This is extremely important. Now, that was Dan Schnorr, who's the Doctors Without Borders lead in the field in Ukraine. He was talking about how they have converted an entire hospital in Kyiv to where it can be ready for mass casualties. And that fits in with what Matthew was just talking about, because that's what would happen if there was a mass use of chemical weapons. They're trying to teach this hospital. They emptied it of everything but 200 personnel, and they flew in trauma surgeons, and they're teaching them for mass wounds or chemical weapons. I am also very concerned about the chemical weapons issue, because not only is there sarin gas, but they also, the Russians, have another form of nerve gas that's even more powerful. Would they be able to have atropine on hand? Would they be able to get the antidotes there? Doctors Without Borders has been heroic at trying to convert regular facilities like hospitals into mass casualty hospitals. Now, you can't do that overnight, right? It's an enormous process, but they've been doing it. And they've been working with the Ukrainian government, by the way, the Ministry of Health, since 1999 on chronic infections, Rich. So they have the structure in place and the interactions in place that they then use to try to convert these things.
And Matthew, very quickly, we've seen the battlefield change significantly over the last month. It appears as though now the Russians are only focused, or saying they're focused, on eastern Ukraine after the failed for Kyiv for now has failed. What's next in the Russian strategy?
Yeah, that's a great question. It seems like the Russian military is on Plan C at this point, where they're digging in, it seems, with trench warfare around Kyiv in the places that they've gained control of. And according to the Russian military this morning, is that they're going to be focusing at least on the eastern aspect of the warfare and relegating the northern and southern aspects. So it's likely that they're just trying to reevaluate and reorganize because they've suffered so many losses. I think going forward, we're going to see them really sort of try to solidify gains in the Donbass region.
All right, Matthew Shoemaker and Dr. Mark Siegel, thank you very much for joining us this evening.